We're recording, and as you might have heard, the virtual chats are now available for viewing on YouTube. So please go check them out. There's a link on our homepage. So lots of fun, hours and hours of virtual chats available. So last month, for Archaeology Month, the archaeologists took over the chat, which was fantastic. Thank you to everyone who made that happen. Patrick and I are back this month. Hey, Patrick.
Hello.
So, hey, we've got a really informative, jam-packed Halloween chat, a little extra long this time because we've got so much to talk about. So we'll be doing a few new things this month, so if there are any technical difficulties, please bear with us. We've got a few of us here in central office together in the same room for the first time, which is neat. So that's cool. And we'll also maybe be doing some polling, so be on the lookout for that. So for the lineup today, we've got our historic bridge specialist, Mary Kennedy, and we've got a special guest, Stephanie Wagner. Hey, Mary, and who is the Director of Bridge Engineering here at INDOT. Thank you so much for joining us. We're super excited you're here today, Stephanie. So Mary and Stephanie will be talking about Design Memo 2119 and revisions to the design manual regarding the historic bridge review process. After that, we've got our history team lead, Susan Brannigan, and historians Clint Kelly and Kellen Alexander, and they'll be talking about the MPPA submission process. They'll be giving best practices, tips and tricks for an efficient process. So that's going to be, I think, super helpful for everyone out there. After that, Patrick's going to share a few quick updates about things going on here at CRO. And then I know what everyone's really here for is we'll be talking about scary stories. So while we're talking, thinking in the back of your mind about all the ghost stories, spookiness that you may have encountered either in work or in life in general, and we'll be sharing those at the end. I think we should come up with maybe like a prize at some point. So maybe we should think about that to encourage, to everyone to share their stories. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mary and Stephanie, and thank you everyone for joining us.
Thanks, Anthony. So as Anthony mentioned, one of the things we're going to try today is something new, doing a little polling, and we thought we'd start off with a couple questions just to kind of gauge the audience's knowledge level about the first topic that we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to launch a poll question for you all, hopefully. All right, so it's showing up on the screen now, so you can vote with your answer here. So first question we have is, which type of historic bridge project processed under the Historic Bridges Programmatic Agreement requires a public hearing? A, a select bridge rehab, B, a non-select bridge rehab, C, a non-select bridge rehab, or D, all of the above. If you want to take a minute and ponder that question. Don't worry, they're anonymous. We don't know who answered what, so we won't be scoring you or anything later. It's all anonymous. So, looks like we have the majority of people saying all of those scenarios. A lot of people saying a select bridge rehab. Someone had a couple of responses trickling in here. Not quite everybody's voted, but Neil looks like select bridge rehab. Oh, it's tying up here.
Neck and neck.
Yeah. It's kind of crucial because one of those answers is correct and the other one's not. So
That's great. Yeah. I applaud the 2% of people that are choosing non-select bridge rehab. Going out on a limb there.
Yeah. So the answer for that one is all of the above, actually. So if you are processing a historic bridge project through the PA, regardless of the bridge type and regardless of the scope of work, it does require a public hearing. That is one of the stipulations of the Historic Bridge PA, that a project process through it does require a hearing. So that would be all of the above. So question number 2. On the screen here. Which type of historic bridge project processed under the Historic Bridges PA requires plan review submittals? A select bridge rehab. B, a non-select bridge rehab. C, a non-select bridge replacement. D, all of the above. Or E, only A and B. So, got quite a few responses trickling in here. A lot of people are saying all of the above, and a lot of people are saying only A and B. Wait a second here. Looks like most people think all of the above, and actually the answer for that one is just A and B. So in terms of the plan reviews that need to take place, that's only when we have a rehab of a bridge. And it doesn't matter if it's select or non-select. If we're rehabbing the bridge, then it does need to have those plan reviews.
Was that a trick question because they all receive engineering plan reviews? Just to throw that in there from the engineering department.
Yes, that is true. I should have specified what kind of plan submittals. Yeah, that's true. So Stephanie makes a good point. All of them are going to get some sort of review by INDOT, even the replacement projects. But per the PA, the reviews that, I'll clarify, the reviews that go to SHPO and have SHPO provide input would be the rehab ones. Thank you for that clarification.
Just giving you a hard time. I've been partying and crashing, so.
So here we have our third question. I'm watching out there. Again, related to plan reviews. How many plan review submittals of those historic bridge rehab projects are required under the Historic Bridges PA? 0? Well, we know that one's not, nobody should answer that one. So there's going to be some sort of review. So 1, 2, or 3? Go ahead and submit your answers there. And this one is looking very good because the majority of people are saying 3, and that is the correct answer. They do, for rehab of a historic bridge and the PA requires 3 plan submittals. And we will go over that in more detail here. So we'll go ahead and get started with the presentation part. Anthony, if you want to advance.
I realized I forgot to.
The agenda. Yeah.
Yes, here's the agenda.
So Stephanie and I are here to go over Design Memorandum 21-19. Hopefully most of you are aware of it, either through the listserv, environmental listserv, or the design listserv, that it did get issued back in September, and it was effective immediately. And any design memo on this one can be found on our website. Next slide, please. So you might wonder why we issued this memo at this time. You know, what's the intent behind this? Basically, it's to provide consistency across the different parts of INDOT, across our different documents, to make sure we have the same guidance in our documents across the board. So these, mainly it's related to the plan reviews. In the Historic Bridges PA, which was signed and executed in 2006, it says in attachment B for the standard treatment approach for rehab projects that there should be 3 plan reviews that go to the SHPO for 30 days at approximately 30% complete, 60% complete, and the final design. And so that has been around since 2006. It's not something new. We should all be aware of it, but Our implementation of it over the years has been pretty inconsistent in terms of how many of those reviews did get done. Some projects might have one or two of them. Some projects did have three, but there were quite a few that didn't have all three of those reviews. And so we had conversations, with SHPO and Federal Highway over the years about the lack of consistency in that, and came to agreement that yes, we need to enforce this. This isn't a PA. This is something that we don't want to jeopardize our relationships with other agencies or other consulting parties, the historic bridge preservation community. We need to make sure we're upholding our part of the bargain here and having these reviews done. In 2019, we did have a message on our listserv early in the year saying, hey, from now on, we need to be enforcing this. We need to have these reviews done. And then later in 2019, we did incorporate it into our manual, the Cultural Resources Manual, specifying those reviews and outlining that. But the missing piece of the puzzle was the design memo. So if you are working on an environmental document, you're on the cultural resources side, you might be going to the PA and going to our manual a lot and seeing that. But if you're a designer, you're an engineer, and you're working on these historic bridge projects, where are you going to go for that information? More than likely, you're looking at the design manual on a daily basis. And so we need it to have those specifications in there too. So it's just bringing everything up to a consistent format, consistent guidance. Next slide. So this is just a table outlining all the revisions that were made, and we'll go over each one of them briefly. Next. So the first revision that was made in chapter 14 was in the section dealing with public hearings. And we actually took this opportunity, since we were going in there and making some revisions anyway, to provide a little clarification and update on public hearings in general, because in the past couple of years, INDOT has changed the public involvement process quite a bit, going from centralized public involvement to having the districts manage and control that. And so that decentralization, we wanted to update, the language here so that designers know that, public involvement now, you're going to the district staff for that, the project manager. Just taking that opportunity to clarify that information while we were working on that chapter anyway. Another thing we wanted to put in here is that any project processed under the Historic Bridges PA does require a hearing. I wanted to make that clear. We did note that there are sometimes minor project scopes that don't go through the Historic Bridges PA, and they're processed under our minor projects PA. In that case, we are you don't have to do a hearing, because that hearing requirement is tied to the Historic Bridges PA. So if you have a very minor scope of work, some of them in the past we've done is just bridge painting. All we're doing is painting it, or maybe some minor sidewalk repair or railing repair, something like that. It might fall under the minor projects PA instead. It wouldn't have that hearing requirement. Always coordinate with our office if you have a project that you think might fit under that, and we will work through that process and figure out how to get through that process. Next slide. The next section, we added in the information about those 3 plan reviews, where they take place, approximately 30, 60, and final. And we put in there about the SHPO having a 30-day comment period. That's a requirement from the Historic Bridges PA. So really, we just want, when a designer's scoping out a project, a historic bridge project, a rehab project, that they know these are the 3 sets of plans I'm going to have to prepare, and also here's the timeframes that are associated with them, because SHPO's going to have to review them. INDOT needs to look at them before they go to SHPO. So just helping get that information so you can develop your scope and your schedule accordingly to meet these requirements. Next slide. So the next couple of slides is just showing the different places where it talks about the different stages of plans where we added in that there is that historic bridge one that needs to be done. So this was related to preliminary plans. Next slide. Then again, we're discussing the hearing plans, approximately 60%, and then the final plans, just putting that information, incorporating into the existing plan submittal information that, hey, if it's a historic bridge, you're going to do something a little special, a little different. Next slide. Then we just had a couple of sections that needed a revised number as a result of us adding some things in. Next slide. Then moving on to chapter 412, we made a minor revision related to the definition of a non-select bridge. We realized that we hadn't quite copied exactly that definition from the Historic Bridge PA, so we were just clarifying some of the language in there so it matched up with the definition that was in the Historic Bridges PA. Next slide. And then again, in chapter 412, we have the plan reviews that are specified out, especially where we're talking about the Historic Bridge alternatives analysis, just recognizing that those plan reviews are going to be coming down the line as well, and the comment periods that are associated with them. And then also putting in there that if you have plan reviews that are outstanding when you're working on your CE document, those need to be in the commitments for the CE document. We have to have those in the project commitments database. We want to make sure we track those, follow those, make sure they get implemented. And then we need those plan reviews to occur before the environmental consultation form is submitted, so you can show in that form that, yes, this is when they occurred. We sent it to SHPO on this date, they commented on this date, for each one of those to show that they have been completed. Next slide. So we did have a couple of questions that came up when we published the new design memo. So I'm just going to summarize. It's very wordy on the screen because it's very technical and wordy. I'll try to summarize it, and then Stephanie's going to provide the response we have to the questions. So the first one was related to LPA projects and saying, well, for an LPA project, you're only required to submit stage 3 for INDOT review. For the bridge group to look at those. So when we have these other plan submittals, how should we go about that? Who's going to get them? How's that going to work when technically for LPAs, only that one is required on the design side of things?
So this is a good question. The LPA project development process does reduce the required submittals for LPA projects, but the historic effort and coordination supersedes those requirements. So those are still going to need to come in for the stages we've set out in this design memo. They can be marked for bridge coordination only when you submit them through ERMS, and that way we know that's the purpose of this submittal. My team probably will be reviewing them in some capacity as we support Mary and her efforts to do all that coordination, and she relies on us for that. So we may look at them from that perspective, but not as a complete engineering review submittal. The one other thing to mention with that is for your stage 2, even though these would be related to the LPA ones, would be for historic bridge coordination only, it's important to still include a level 1 checklist and a current cost estimate, because changes in those can really affect what was approved in the alternatives analysis. And if those have changed significantly, it might change the outcome of that analysis.
Thank you. Yeah. All right, so our next question. Do the 60% or the hearing plans have to be reviewed and approved by SHPO or the historic bridge specialist at INDOT prior to holding the public hearing?
We discussed this when the question came in, and we feel like they don't, because you're going to be collecting comments from the SHPO coordination process and from the public hearing, and all those can just be addressed in the next submittal.
Okay. Next question. So when the 30% plans or stage 2 are submitted to the historic bridge specialist prior to them going over to SHPO, we had the question, is it required to submit all the other stage 2 review submission documents, which are listed there on the screen? So in the past, I wouldn't necessarily know when the plans came in to the bridge group. I mean, often they would let me know, hey, we got these plans. Sometimes then I would ask, hey, are you going to submit those to SHPO too, to the consultant? Or sometimes they would let me know. There was a lot of inconsistency in how that developed, so that is a good question. And so moving forward, we're going to try to address that a little bit.
We got more data than we know what to do with sometimes. So these should be full engineering review requirements for our review checklists. And then we will be coordinating the historic bridge specialist review will be happening at the same time as the engineering review. Because a lot of times those are interrelated to the review we're doing directly relates to what SHPO is asking for and the correspondence with them. So those should be full regular stage 2, 3 and hearing submittals. And then from our end, we'll be doing that coordination at the same time.
So that was all the questions we had submitted ahead of time. So certainly if you have any other questions, we'd welcome you to put those in the chat or raise your hand if you'd like to ask them out loud. Any other questions or comments about the signed memo? Perfect opportunity. We have Stephanie here today. Go ahead and ask those.
Yeah, now's your chance, right? You know?
You guys didn't tell me to bring a special Halloween background.
Well, you know, INDOT Central Office is a little bit scary. So using that background, using just
It's true.
conference room background might be appropriate.
Well, I guess, I mean, I'm surprised no one has any questions. There's so much information in the new memo and revisions.
Well, certainly, if anybody has them, you know, as we go on, put them in the chat and we'll take a look at them. I think Stephanie stayed.
Yeah.
Okay. But otherwise, I guess we can move on. I'm not seeing anything.
Must have been great, well-written memo.
We covered it all so well.
Yeah. And I'm sure you can look forward to a completely seamless future, right? Where there will be no one will have any issues with it, obviously, evidently. So, all right. Well, our next section will be led by Susan Brannigan, and we got Clint Kelly and Kellen Alexander to talk about MPPAs, which of course, you know, makes up like a huge bulk of our submissions and just isn't, can be very time consuming, but if you follow these tips and tricks, maybe it won't be so much. So with that, I'll hand it over to Susan.
Hi, everybody. I'm Susan Brannigan, the INDOT CRO History Team Lead. And today we are going to, as part of the virtual chat, talk to you about everybody's favorite B minor project PA submissions to CRO. We're going to kind of give you an overview of the process. It might be a refresher, more like for most people. And we're going to provide you with a few tips to help you ensure that your submission goes through the review process smoothly. Then after that, as Anthony said, we're going to hear from Clint Kelly, who's going to speak a little bit about B1s in particular, and then Kellen Alexander is going to talk about B9s. So we will go ahead and get started. Okay, next slide, please. So when you're submitting a new submission to a new MPPA submission to CRO, you want to be aware of a couple of things from the get-go. The first would be that you're using the most current guidance that's available on our website. If we ever update our guidance, it's going to be shared on the listserv. So that's another reason to, if you're not signed up for the listserv, get on the listserv, because you will get that information. So make sure you're using the current guidance. And also, before you submit, check and see if your project can meet the conditions of Category A. Most people who are with us today probably know that CRO does not prepare determination forms for Category A. If you have questions about its applicability to your project, you should first contact the appropriate INDOT INDOT district environmental staff. And they can help you if they have questions about your questions. They can share those with us. Of course, if there are any unique circumstances that are part of your project, like if you don't know the level of soil disturbance or something like that, you can go ahead and contact CRO. And all of this information is included in our CRM, which is available on our website. So next slide, please. Again, this information is in our CRM, but we felt like it was worthwhile to share it with you and kind of go over it as a refresher. Any projects that are going to require right-of-way acquisition have to be submitted to CRO under Category B using the MPPA submission form. And also this is probably not your favorite, but after you submit to us, you need to be aware that it's possible that we might review the information and then the project doesn't meet the conditions of the project, and that you have to go through Bill 106. It doesn't happen that often, but it's not really all that infrequent. I think we've had several recent incidents where a PA submission turned into a full 106 situation. So it's something to keep in mind. Try to submit your project information for MPPA review as early in the process as possible. That would be ideally when right-of-way is known. And just to note with that, when you are submitting to us initially, try to provide us with the, what we like to call the worst case right-of-way scenario, which would allow us to, in our review, really give a thorough look to your project details, try to anticipate any contingencies that might, come into play if you're close to, a district or something like that. But the worst case right-of-way scenario is an important thing to include in your initial submission to us. Doing that can maybe help us offset the possibility that 106 could slow down your project schedule. Also, we need accurate and complete project information. We don't do this very often, but we can and have rejected incomplete submissions. So make sure you have all that information included. And then a reminder, and I think this is just a good thing to make sure that you do. When you are submitting the MPPA to us, be mindful of who you send it to. All of those submissions need to be addressed to the two team leads, myself and Sean Miller. If you have a project that's an LPA MPPA submission, that should be addressed to our LPA administrator, Anthony Ross. Make sure you copy the team leads on that. And if you have a project that involves a historic bridge and an MPPA, it should be addressed to Mary, our historic bridge specialist. And again, make sure you copy the team leads. This is really important, and it's a stopgap. It's insurance to make sure your project doesn't get lost in the shuffle because somebody's on vacation or something like that. So please make sure that you do address your submissions accordingly, as I just described. And if you need our contact information, that is available on our website in the CRM. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, when we put this presentation together, we kind of brainstormed at the beginning and came up with a list of some pretty consistent things that we're seeing with submissions. And we made a list, not a very long list, but this is something that we thought would be really worthwhile to talk about during the chat. So I'm just going to go through them and then we will discuss them kind of in detail in the subsequent slides. We're having an issue with shapefiles. Those shapefiles must accompany an MPPA submission. And we're getting this kind of one-size-fits-all deal sometimes where it's kind of thought that what's good for archaeology is good for above ground. And increasingly, we're seeing incomplete project descriptions. That's an issue. I apologize. Oh, it looks like there's a typo. But oftentimes, we're noticing that the project scope information that is submitted to us in the MPPA doesn't match or even sometimes even come close to the project scope information that's contained in the red flag investigation or RFI. That's a problem. And another thing, and this is probably, it has ties to just about everything on this list. There's poor communication, or at times none, between the primes and their sub-consultants. And then finally on the list, we have had a lot of lately, or at least in the last year, a lot of MPPAs that are submitted too early in the process and that then require multiple updates and revisions. And by multiple, I don't mean like one or two. We've had a few that were, over 4. So, and this is not an opportunity to pick on anybody. But we are seeing these things and on a fairly consistent basis. So we're going to go through them one by one on the next few slides and just kind of, so you can sort of be aware of this and maybe reset your submissions accordingly so that you're not having these problems. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so back to the one size fits all for the shapefiles. There really is no one size fits all when it comes to shapefiles that you submit with your MPPA submission. We have 2 units in CRO, archaeology and history. We're both looking at different things. So our shapefiles need to reflect that. For the archaeologists, they need shapefiles that show the survey area and limits, including temporary and permanent right-of-way, plus any area that's surveyed beyond it. And then for historians, they need the project area shapefiles, and that should include the project construction limits and all right-of-way. And for right-of-way acquisition, we need to know what it consists of, where it's coming from, and how much of it's being acquired. And the same applies to right-of-way reacquisition. And just to get back to that one-size-fits-all idea, I think it's a kind of it's not an ill-intended incident, but it's something that I think people think doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter until it does matter, which is kind of something, sort of a human thing. But so we've had a few instances where we've had the wrong shape files for review, and it's taken a while for us to get what we need. And then in turn, we've had some issues with turnaround times in reviews. And in other words, it has impacted the project schedule to a degree. So it is important to pay attention to the fact that we do need these shape files for each unit of CRO. Okay, next slide, please. All right, complete project description information. So we have the submission form. It has all those places on, on the form for you to provide the specific information and accurately supply that information, including all the proposed work that's included in your project. For example, if you have, an overlay and you have curb ramp updates that are part of that overlay, you need to specifically identify them on the form. There's a place there that says, if the project includes curb ramp, curb or sidewalk work, please specify the locations of such work. It's really not enough to say, please see the attached plan sheets. I mean, plan sheets are great, providing them, it's great, but we all know that those are subject to change. And regardless, it's not going to save you any time to have us do that, because the reviewer is going to have to confirm and verify the locations with you. So playing catch up, phone tag, whatever, that can lead to delays. So it's really in your best interest to remember that you're responsible for providing the complete project information in the submission materials. And just to kind of elaborate a little bit more, again, the project description should describe all the proposed work that's included in the project. And we need more than just one sentence. And yes, we have seen multiple submissions that really have only one sentence or a couple of sentences that just describe the location of the project and just basically go over what's gonna, happen. It is very important that the project description information provides details that are as close as possible to the project's purpose and need. What are the deficiencies that this project is supposed to address, and how will that be accomplished? We need that information, and it's better for you to provide it from the outset in order to, forego any delays to your project. So, next slide, please. Again, scope of work information that we're seeing isn't matching what's in the RFI. And sometimes if the RFI is submitted to INDOT SAM after you submit your MPPA to CRO, please let us know that that is the case, and provide us with any new project information that's included in the RFI that wasn't included in the submitted MPPA materials. Because CROs having to spend a lot of time running down some of these, some of this information. And again, that can lead to delays. We are having to look through RFI documents, make comparisons, look through engineering reports to find that project scope information. And, we should be getting that from our applicants. And, ultimately, if there are discrepancies in the information about the project, that will likely be picked up in the CE review. And again, it's in your best interest to make sure these things are synced up and that you're providing us with the most accurate, up-to-date information about, what's going on with the project scope of work. Next slide. This is the one that we really, really wanted to talk about today and bring to everybody's attention. We need to see communication between primes and their subs improve. The primes need to provide the specific project information to the subs. For example, subs need to know if their project is LPA or INDOT. It's kind of incredible, but we continue to get submissions where that information is incorrect on the submission form. And subs also need to know what the project schedule is. Those are things that are important to making sure this process moves smoothly, we've heard from some subs that the communication that they have with the prime may not be, adequate, or it might not even really exist. And, if that's the case, we suggest strongly being proactive and contacting your prime, asking the questions, getting the information, so that, your project can go through our process fairly easily. It also helps your communication with us, and it's always a good thing in that regard, and as well as moving things through the system smoothly and on time. Okay, next slide. So resubmitting MPPAs, it probably can't be avoided. And, sometimes we realize that maybe it's because you submitted a little too early, didn't have, all the project information at hand that you knew wouldn't change. And sometimes that can't be avoided, that situation. But if you are resubmitting, the worst case right-of-way scenario that I talked about earlier can kind of be your saving grace if you have to submit, for a revision or update to us. Because if we've already looked at the worst possible case scenario, we've already considered any contingencies that might affect your project, we're going to be able to probably look at things a little more quickly. If there's a reduction in right-of-way, and we've already looked at the worst case situation, that probably would not require a 20-day review period. But if there is an addition of right-of-way, you'll definitely need a 20-day review period, a new one. And if we haven't looked at this stuff before, you're also kind of running the risk that if there is something that needs to be updated, in that regard, if there's a nearby listed or eligible resource, could potentially pose a risk to whether or not your project can meet the conditions of the PA. So you might find yourself in a situation where you have full 106. But regardless, when you do need to submit, we do not need a totally new MPPA submission form. We just need that information in an email. You can send that to the reviewer of your project, but make sure that you copy the team leads on your communication and just provide us, with the specific project changes that have been made, so that we can work with you on your particular situation. So kind of as a recap, before I turn it over to Clint, this is sort of a refresher on the MPPA, information and the guidance. Make sure that you're familiar with it, with our current guidance. Make sure that you're on the listserv if you're not. If you have any issues signing up, let us know and help. And the big one, which I think sort of has, overreaching all of these aspects that we've discussed, is improving overall communications between the prime and the settle, and giving us that exact information that we need. Another thing to remember is you can always reach out to us with questions. That's what we're here for. We're here to help, and we're ready and available for that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Clint Kelly. He's going to talk a little bit about category B1.
All right. I guess the Al's talking before, so I'm just throwing the wrench in the audio today. It looks like we have a question from Karen Wood about right-of-way, and she asks, question on right-of-way. For worst case, would that look like a range of amounts 0.2 to 1 acre, or use the threshold under half an acre?
Personally, I would say we don't want to see ranges. We want to see like a maximum number. And we'll need to know where that's coming from, so especially with the 4F MOU, we're including de minimis determinations with MPPAs. We do need to know where right-of-way is coming from. So if you're unsure of how much is coming from, like try to get with your designers and see if they have we think this would be the most that we would need. We want to know that number. I think the threshold number comes from the CE requirements, and it really doesn't have any impact on the MPPA or Section 106.
Right.
Nothing else.
Yeah, I think
that hits it on.
Yeah, that hits it.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we got that addressed before we moved on too far. So I guess we can go on to the next slide, please. So again, my name is Clint, and I'm going to be talking about B1 category, which, if you don't know, that involves sidewalk, curbs, curb ramps, and the like. And a fun little picture here of the sidewalk that really doesn't look like it was thought out too well. You can move on to the next slide, please. So some of the some of the best practices that would come with doing the submission for the B1. Make sure that, and I think Susan touched on this, list the location that the curb ramps will be updated. If this information is unknown, give us the worst case scenario. So tell us which intersections will be updated, and graphics always help to show us the locations, and we can kind of match it up with street view and get a better sense of what exactly is going to go on with this project. With that note, if sidewalk is going to be reconstructed or redone, please let us know where the limits are. We noticed that in some of the submissions that the curb ramps tend to be the focus, and then there's kind of a side note about that there's going to be some sidewalk reconstruction. That needs to be made clear and shown where that's going to happen. Because if we need field work, that has to occur next to where the sidewalk is going to be occurring, and not just the typically the corners of the intersections that the ramps will be updated. Again, Susan touched on this, but project plans are not a substitution for a project description. We do like to see plans. They are helpful if they're available, but what we need to actually process this is the locations, and again, written description, graphics are ideal. But the plans are just supplemental information for us if we have additional questions or need to know kind of what more fine-tuned information about what's going on at that location. The third thing is please don't do preemptive field work. Even if there's a resource that would require a field visit and you've looked on there and noticed that, we may have a recent visit from a previous project that we can use to fulfill that B1 fieldwork requirement. If fieldwork's needed, we'll let you know after we've taken a look at the project. One of the things that we now do have online is a CRO map that is public to you, and it shows where various project areas are and such that can help guide you to know if we've done field work there, so you can kind of in a little bit better anticipation of field work if needed. With that said, LPA projects are exempt from this. So if you're doing a B1 for an LPA project and you do notice that there are resources that are adjacent to the project, do go ahead and do that field work without us prompting you. Next slide, please. Now we're going to talk about some of the fieldwork tips. The first one, and is a big one, if a site visit is required, QP personnel must conduct this field work. We shouldn't be sending non-QP personnel out into the field and then having a QP essentially look over their work and okaying it. The QP must physically be conducting this field work. We've had that a couple of times. If the B1 project is associated with an HMA overlay, only the portions of that are including curb work, curb ramps, sidewalk work, that only needs to have field work. You do not need to go out and document the entire project area that's just the HMA overlay or road work. That being said, this really is more geared towards above ground only field work. So if you have questions about the archaeology, contact one of our friendly local archaeologists here at CRO. Another good tip is know the project, what it entails before your field work. And when I say this, I mean know which curb ramps are going to be redone, where curb work's going to happen, if there's any sidewalk reconstruction. Make sure that this is well known so that you can go out there and do the field work in one shot. We don't have to essentially, once we get field work, notice that there's something missing, and then we have to ask about it, and then potentially another field visit is needed. This kind of next one kind of ties into that. Several panels often of a curb ramp are going to be reconstructed for ADA updates. Sometimes it's just right there at the curb. Sometimes it may extend back several panels. Make sure that when you're doing your photo documentation and noting all of this, that you're capturing what will be done. If section of sidewalk are planned to be reconstructed, make sure to document the resources and unusual features in those areas as well, and not just the curb ramp intersections. That's a big one. Again, I think sometimes the curb ramps tend to kind of overshadow the sidewalk reconstruction, because to be honest, that's typically what we see with the B1 is just going to be those individual intersections. Next slide, please. So when in the field, ensure that field work is conducted when the sidewalks and the curb ramps are clear, i.e. That there's no snow on there, or that there are no leaves on there covering everything. We understand that you don't control the weather, but if your planned field work falls on a day when you realize that it's snowing, perhaps a better rescheduled field visit would be better. Make sure that the photographs are pointed towards the resource and include the curb ramp rather than the curb facing the street. As you notice in the lower right-hand photo, you can see on the other side of the street, anything, it's very clear. You can see where the grass comes up to the sidewalk. There are some stairs back there, which I would doubt that would be impacted by the project. But if you look at the nearest curb ramp, you can't tell what is behind there. There could be a retaining wall, we don't know. So it's best to make sure that even if you're taking a wide shot, that if you're trying to get both of them, to make sure that you're getting the resource behind the curb ramp so that we can tell what's there. Next slide. Now, what are considered unusual features? It needs to be well understood here that what we're going to discuss here is not an all-inclusive list. So just because we don't mention it here doesn't mean that it's not could be considered an unusual feature. So if an unusual feature of a potentially eligible resource is adjacent to the project, document it and tell us what it is. So some of the things to let us know, is it older or does it appear to be a modern feature or a new introduction? An unusual feature is not just wood, stone, brick, or something that originates to the, is original feature to the structure. And anything currently adjacent to the resource should be noted. Oftentimes modern concrete walls, split rail fences, stuff that wouldn't be considered historic isn't being documented. We do need to know what's there because we are looking at these project areas on street view to process the MPPA forms. And we're noticing stuff on there that isn't discussed in the documentation from the field work. So for instance, modern brick, when we look on street view, we just see brick. And we have no clue whether that's modern or it's historic, which in turn we have to call you or email you and say, hey, what is this that was here? If this stuff is, if you go ahead and document it in the field work, the section 2 for the MPPA, it just makes it clear to us what is there and what it is. Is it old? Is it new? So some of you may be asking, well, why should we document all of these, anything that's adjacent? Well, again, just so we know what is there, and just because you document something in your notes doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to become a commitment. A lot of these things is going to be more for our benefit because we're processing the MPPA. You guys are the eyes and ears when field work is needed. So you give us the needed context to determine whether a commitment is needed. And if you have questions, just don't hesitate to reach out and ask us. Next. So the first one is a common thing that you're going to see is stone curb and sidewalks. As you can see, got some stone curb there in the middle, stone sidewalk on the right. I included the one in the upper left-hand side as a kind of a caveat for you guys, because I know that it's tricked me before, but a lot of times the city will paint the curbs and you can't really tell until you get up close to that curb that that's stone and not concrete. So be on the lookout for those painted curbs, because it could be tricky and it could be stone. So just word to the wise there. Next slide. Next common feature we see, brick streets, brick sidewalks. Again, even if it's a modern feature, it's modern brick, make sure to note that and tell us, and grab a photo just so we know what we're looking at. Next slide. Fences and trees. So I think the fence issue is kind of a gimme here, because everybody, I think, thinks a fence is going to be an unusual feature, but what about trees? I mean, it's difficult to tell, unless you're an arborist, I suppose, exactly how old these trees are. So if there are, large trees adjacent to the field work, make sure you're documenting this, and let us know if this is planned to be removed, if you know it. Because almost guarantee that if we see that, we are going to ask that question. So again, this is just tips to help move this process along, so we're not going back and forth a lot. Next slide. More fences. Again, we got example of stone fence, wrought iron. We got one here in the lower right-hand corner that has got some stone pillars with a white picket fence. Again, some other types of fences to know about to note are like the decorative split rail fences and that kind of thing, just for our knowledge and to help facilitate the MPPA processing. Next, please. Other things is concrete steps, as you see there in the right-hand side. Again, a lot of times these curb ramp updates and stuff go back several panels. So if that is known, make sure that you're documenting anything that could be impacted by the project scope. Retaining walls of any kind, concrete, make sure you note that. And again, do document whether this appears to be, if you can tell, not always you can tell, but if you can, where there appears to be a new pour, or this appears to have some age to it, and could potentially be considered historic in terms of 50 years or older. Next slide, please. Buildings as unusual features. A lot of times we don't think about buildings as themselves as an unusual feature, but sometimes that could be the case. And we're going to discuss a few instances when we need to make sure that we're talking about features of buildings that could be considered unusual features. So first one, I think is most people kind of it's obvious, are when building support columns extend into the sidewalk. In the lower left-hand corner, I mean, it seems pretty obvious that likely this wouldn't be impacted because it's kind of back behind the sidewalk, but we do need to know that it's there and make sure that's documented. The one on the right, that one's a little bit more risky because that could potentially look, it's right up next to there. It doesn't look like it's behind anything, so that could be impacted. So just make sure that that's being documented and discussed for context. And when giving us this context, it doesn't have to be a long drawn out explanation, but just let us know what we're looking at. Next slide, please. Another thing is when the part of the building is going to be adjacent to the proposed work. This is kind of akin to the one that we just discussed, but in this situation here that is depicted, it's a little more subtle. It doesn't stick out like the others do, but those concrete steps leading up to the entrance of the building are adjacent to the curb or the sidewalk, and likely could be very likely be impacted by project activity. Or let me back up. It could very likely be in the area that sidewalk work and curb work could occur. So just make sure to note that what's there. Next slide. This one is a little bit more tricky, but and again, these are more guidelines here, but when reconstruction of a sidewalk or the curb is going to go right up to the building face, it's kind of a red flag. If the sidewalk is going to be lowered at that location, or the stone foundation or a foundation period could be exposed, or if you're noticing that the foundation it appears damaged, or if it's stone. And using stone, that's the one that I typically see that is more of concern, but definitely if the foundation type appears like it's more susceptible to damage, such as like a limestone foundation due to the age and the weathering and the material, could be more susceptible to damage versus concrete or brick. So if you see that, make sure that wherever that work is going to occur is documented, and you kind of tell us what's going on there, whether it'll be impacted or what they're doing to potentially protect the structure from any damage. Again, you don't have to be, an in-depth thing there. If we have questions, we'll let you know. But if it's not going to be impacted, let us know, and we'll go from there. Next slide. Some miscellaneous features. The top left-hand side, we've got just a stone pillar next to a resource, and next to that is a mid-20th century street sign. Middle one has a pump, which was just kind of cool. It just kind of random sitting there. The one to the right, I think it's a little bit more tricky, and oftentimes isn't quite, I think it's easy to miss or escape our evaluation. But a bridge that is within the historic bridge inventory, be it non-select or select, those are considered National Register eligible, so would be considered something that needs to be documented, and we need to make sure isn't going that the B1 work is not going to impact the structure. Next slide. Modern features adjacent to or within a resource. This is something that we've noticed quite a bit, and this is why we really want good documentation on what is out there. We do ask that QPs do document aesthetic modern features, for example, brick, stamped concrete, faux historic street lamps and street lights, street signs and street lights, planters, and that kind of thing that are part of a district or is adjacent to an eligible resource, and to make sure that you do know whether this is modern or historic. Now you may be asking us, why do we do this? Why do we want this? Well, oftentimes we will put in what we refer to here at CRO our soft commitments to ensure that a municipality or property owner is consulted before these type of features are disturbed or removed. Obviously, go ahead and go to the next slide, please. Thank you. As you can see in the upper hand left side, we've got some, in a historic district here, we've got some nice older looking street lights. We've got a planter there. They've put, obviously it's modern brick. But with that being said, the city has put that in there for some sort of aesthetic feature. And we don't want to upset them by just randomly taking out their streetlights. This process allows, with the soft commitment, and again, it doesn't really stop any work or anything like that, but it does typically give, if it's going to be disturbed, to have to reach out to the municipality to let them know and determine what they want done, whether they want an in-kind replacement put in there, or if they care. And if they don't care, that's fine. But it just gives them a voice, so that they're in the process before we take out something that they put in there for a reason. On the picture to the right, this is just it's a notable or outstanding resource, and they've got a modern stone retaining wall that you see just about anywhere. Bricks, stones, you probably just go get at Lowe's. But it is adjacent to proposed curb ramp work, so we do want to document that, because we potentially may want to put in a soft commitment to let the homeowner know that would be impacted and what they want done, whether they want the same thing put back in, or do they care? They just want a retaining wall up there. So again, it doesn't really have a lot of teeth, just gives the opportunity to make sure we reach out to the locals before we tear up their stuff. Next slide, please. So some of the B1 highlights that we just discussed: don't do preemptive field work. We'll let you know if we don't have any previous field work in the area and it is needed. QPs must conduct the field work in person. If the project is part of a HMA overlay that is B1, that includes the curb ramp, and sidewalk, only those locations need field work. We don't need evaluation of the entire HMA overlay section, just the B1 curb ramp and sidewalk section. It is better to over document than to under document. Again, we need to know what's there, and this discussion is just to save time from having to request additional information or ask questions or anything like that. It just facilitates the process and keeps us from having to delay the project. And again, just because you note it doesn't mean it's going to be a commitment. Most of this stuff is going to, unless it is a true unusual feature that was original to the house or something, it doesn't mean it's going to be a commitment. But it gives us the opportunity to assess that as well and determine whether we think that a commitment is needed or not. Don't forget to include the modern features within a district or adjacent to an eligible resource for the potential soft commitment. And I think that's it for me. Next slide. Okay. Before we move on, I just wanted to check, does anybody have any questions about what we just discussed? Or is everybody good and ready to?
I think Jeff had a question about purpose and need, including that in the project description.
I think we've seen submissions where that is included, and it, as kind of was discussed in the presentation, we're not getting enough specific project scope information, and what we get really does need to relate to, as closely as possible, what the project purpose and need is. We need to know what the deficiencies are and what's going to be done to remedy those. So yeah, we do need to have that information.
Yeah. So just for kind of an example, some of the things that we've seen are bridge or culvert replacements where, again, the information is only like 2 or 3 lines, and most of that is the location, and it just essentially says this structure will be replaced. And we, what are you replacing it with? I mean, is there going to be lights? I mean, as far as we know, this bridge is going to be raised up 10 feet in the air, and it's going to have neon pink disco balls and stuff hanging off of it, and we need to know what exactly is going to be replaced there.
Yeah. Anthony, did you?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that, one important point I think to keep in mind in this is that different CRO reviewers will have different approaches, right, with this process. So you may get, and every situation is unique. So there could be specific concerns regarding a specific project. And so you might, get a CRO reviewer coming back, asking you a question, and you're thinking, well, I submitted a similar NPPA a year ago, and I didn't get someone coming back asking me questions. Well, bear with us, please, because there's lots of moving pieces going on with each review, and it's just most effective if you just respond with whatever information you have. There have been instances many times where I've reviewed NPPAs without purpose and needs, and without a purpose and needs statement, and I haven't asked for one. But that doesn't mean that it might not be very important. I remember there was one recent project where I did specifically ask, the purpose and need came to be a really important point of the NPPA review because the project had this weird terminus. It was like ending, and it seemed to end right before it got to the historic district. So you gotta ask yourself, well, why is it ending there? Is it ending there to avoid the historic district and thus to be able to get through with a lower level of section 106 review? Well, that would be a problem. So in order to figure out whether or not that's a problem, we needed to review the purpose and need, and that was a really important part of the NPPA review. It might not always be that important, but.
So I think to sum up, it's good to include it if you've got it. You're going to need it anyway as part of your environmental documentation. So yeah, we're never going to say, oh no, don't include it in the NPPA.
Right. Although please don't put in a blatantly problematic purpose and need statement like the purpose of this project is to replace the bridge,
Right.
because then we're gonna have to correct it, right? One other thing I wanted to say with regard to LPA submissions, might be some differences with what is required or not. Generally, for LPA projects, we don't do soft commitments. Part of that is because the local municipality is this project sponsor, so they can, replace their modern bricks as they want to. So you won't have to document that for LPA sponsored projects. And you can always check with me if you have particular LPA projects where you have questions about the NPPA submission. So, Kellen?
All right. So I'm going to be discussing B9 projects specifically. So those are culvert pipes and other drainage structure projects. So I'm going to hit on the 2 above ground conditions and how we apply them generally, because we've had some questions about those 2 conditions. And then I'll also go over some reoccurring issues we've seen with B9 projects specifically. And again, it's mostly about project description. So I know you guys have heard it a couple of times now, but we're gonna hear it again. Sorry. Sorry, next slide. So for above ground B9s, we have 2 conditions that can be applied. One is what we call BI, which are just projects that are replacing structures in kind. So those are going to be roughly the same size and in roughly the same location. Now, We will, depending on the surrounding areas, we might consider going from like a CMP to a box culvert. That's roughly in kind, as long as it's the same size generally. But usually if you are going from a CMP to a box culvert, it's pretty different. So that'll probably fall under our second condition, which is our BII, which are projects installing a new structure where none have previously existed, or that have a drastically different size in the same location or material, and or there are unusual features present that may be impacted by this replacement project. So if you've got wood, stone, or brick adjacent to the project, that could also kick it over to the BII. So, and we will determine whether the structure is considered new or whether it's a replacement. It's a little fluid, like I said, we kind of use our best judgment and really look at what's going to be impacted. So we're looking at the impacts versus what the structure is actually changing from. But we still need to know what's happening with the structure, which is the second point here with replacement projects. Not so much with slip liners, we know what a slip liner project is, but with replacement projects, we needed a description of what the new structure will be. Because as we said, it will determine whether it's condition BI or condition BII. And with condition BII, it cannot be adjacent to a historic resource. So we do need to know that that's a pretty important distinction between the two conditions. So we really do need to know what's the new structure will be so that we can determine whether it's a replacement in kind or if it's a totally new structure, quote unquote. Next slide. So then our second issue that we've seen lately are specifically with pipe projects. So these are going to be, well, they're mostly pipe projects. Every once in a while we get small box culverts, which are also smaller and are not in bias. So actually it's projects involving structures that are not in bias, but mostly they are small pipes that are being replaced. We do need photos of all the structures that are being replaced or slip lined or whatever is being done to these pipes or these small culverts. We need to know what they look like because we still have to check to see if there are wood, stone, or brick features or parts therein of these structures. Now, unlike with B1, these photos do not need to be taken by a QP. We just need photos of them. And you can use any available photos you have. So if there was a waters report that has some of these photos, we'll take those. As long as we can get a good description and a photo of the resource or the structure that's being replaced. That being said, because they're not in bias, we don't know where these are, so we need you to tell us exactly where these pipes are located so that we can review the surrounding area and look at what's adjacent to it. So maps are great, plan sheets are okay, as long as those are clearly illustrated on these documents where the pipes are. So I've got an example on the next slide, but we also need to know the size, what it currently looks like. Again, because they're not in bias, we don't have the current conditions like we would with a regular culvert replacement. So we do need you to tell us what they look like and what is being done again. And then again, type of material, is it a concrete? Is it concrete, is it metal, and that kind of thing. Next slide. So this is an example of some information we've been provided from an actual MPPA document. As you can see, we got this table. It told us it was on State Road 32. They gave it a structure number. One of them actually was a culvert, and it was in bias, so it had a culvert number. They said the existing size and type, and then what was going to be, it was going to be replaced with. Then they also provided maps, and this map happened to also be a photo key. So all of those are clearly illustrated from the table. We can look at the table, we can look at the map, and then look at the pictures. And it was all a lot easier for us to review this project because we didn't have to go and hunt down this information or ask the consultant again for this information. It was all provided in one go. So this was really great. And actually the photos from the previous slide relate to some of these locations. So those are actual document. And the next slide is just more examples of this. So this was a different take. They provided one general map because all of these culverts were in a fairly small area. Well, I guess these were all pipes. These were all in a very small area, so there's just one map that showed us where it was. And then they also provided a plan sheet with the details, and then on the plan sheet, they had call-outs that told us what it was being replaced with. I do think they actually provided a list as well, so it doesn't have to be a table where they said all this information. But any of this type of combination of graphics and photos is great and very helpful for us. Next slide. A little behind. So that was really all I had for pipes and culverts specifically. Now this is a slightly different issue. If your project is going to involve building temporary access roads, if there are easements, and then any right of way, we need to know about those so that we can include it as part of our review, so we know the whole scope of work. And we also need to know about these things because we need to determine if these areas are in previously disturbed soils or if it's in undisturbed soils. So for archaeology purposes, we definitely need to know if you're going to be building a temporary access road. Additionally, these other extra things, extra right-of-way, temporary access roads, different easements, those can alter which category a project will fall under in the MPPA. The image that you can see is a map. This was an actual project I had. It was a A1 deck replacement project. And because they had to build these temporary access roads, which you can see in black, though it kicked the project into a B6 because the southern access road is actually within a historic district. So in category A's, we don't have to actually look whether it's adjacent to a historic resource. But because they were building this access road and it would impact the historic district, we had to go through B6 instead of just doing an A category. So it really is important for us to know about these things. And with right-of-way, of course, I think archaeology with this project had to go look at that field that's up there to the north. This project was in Battleground, Tippecanoe. So next. Generally, just these are some things to remember, and some other questions that we've gotten over the course of, life. Our definition of adjacent is fluid, and it generally changes from project to project based on the project scope and the surrounding environment. So we can't give you a solid definition of adjacent. We look at each project individually. We generally start with a predetermined buffer area, and then we'll redefine that as the project warrants. But we don't know exactly, we can't tell you over the phone what is adjacent. We'll need some more information. But if you're unsure if a historic property is considered adjacent or not, you can always just ask us. That's what we're here for. Or you could just submit the MPPA form with the appropriate information and the category you think it falls under, and we'll let you know that way. So pretty nice. And then, as you've heard a million times today, if we don't have all the information, it will cause some delays, because every time we ask for additional information from you with MPPAs, we can restart our 20-day submission period or review time. So you may submit it, and then because we have 20 days, we try not to do it, but we may not get to the project until day 18 or 19, and then we have a whole bunch of questions. So we send it back to you, you get to it in a couple of days, well, then we restart our clock when you resubmit that information to us, which is not the greatest, and we know, but our workload is heavy, and we know your workload is heavy, so it just goes back down to the bottom of the pile. So it is really important for you to include all of that information when you get it and as you have it, and to get it to us as soon as possible. So If we do ask for questions, we do try to, especially if they're minor things, we'll try to not restart the clock and we'll try to get to it in a timely manner. But again, it's dependent on our current workload. So we're doing our best. Stick with us. And now we have a couple of questions for you guys. To some changes we're contemplating. We'd like to get some input from you. One of them is about right-of-way. So we're considering changing the MPPA submission form to get that more detailed right-of-way information that we need. Because like we said, right now, all that's on there is there will be right-of-way acquisition, a yes, no, or I don't know checkbox, and if yes, how much? And we really do need more information than that a lot of the time. So what are your guys' thoughts on that change if we ask for where it's coming from, like that type of thing? What should we be asking for? Give us your thoughts on that. And then we're also curious about what you guys are looking at for category A's in MPPA determination forms. Right now, some of our consultants, when we ask on the submission form, what categories this falls under, they'll include A categories in addition to the B categories. Now, that's fine. And then some CRO reviewers will go ahead and include those A categories even if they aren't requested, and some don't. So we're seeing some variability between what's being submitted and what we're producing. Is there a consensus out in the consulting world on whether you want those included or not? Or what feedback have you guys gotten from the CE reviewers? That type of thing. I think Karen's got her hand up. If you want to go ahead, Karen.
Sure. Thanks, Kellen. Yeah, with the right-of-way, that has been one of the biggest issues I've seen as we've done these documentation. We try to submit the MPPAs after the stage, or when we get stage 1 plans, or sometimes when we get stage 2 plans. The issue we see is that there's a difference in right-of-way increase or change in scope from stage 1 to stage 2. And so we typically wait until we get stage 2, if that's allowable for the schedule, because we've done several revisions to right-of-way because it's been increased or it's changed. And earlier when you were talking about the worst case scenario, that makes sense. It's like the red flag. It's like the depth excavation. What is the biggest you can do? Well, we can ask the engineers or the designers, engineers that, but that won't be reflective on the plans if we submit those either. If we submit stage 1 plans and it's showing 0.3 acres of permanent right-of-way and 0.1 acre of temporary, well, we say our worst case scenario is a different number than that. That's reflective of the plans. And then also our project area shapefile, if that's reflective of the stage 1 plans, that's not reflective of the worst case scenario. And I guess it's not really for a solution here. Is if we are doing the worst case scenario, which I like that idea better because I like that it's all inclusive, is asking the designers to give us a KMZ file that we can recreate into a shape file of that worst case scenario, and that's our project area. That's our project area. We can still include plans and maybe just draw on it. This is the worst case scenario, but this is what we have right now. And that way we can still clear this larger project area in due time before stage 2, is potentially completed. So that's what I have on that.
Yeah, and we do accept KMZ files. So if that's all, if it tells the different work types in the KMZ file, we're fine with that. We accept those too. Okay. Just to throw that out. So you don't have to do a lot of editing with the shape files. I don't know if anyone else had any comments or ideas. We do have one more question. It's on the next slide, Anthony.
Okay, what's that?
If you guys have any ideas for other work types that we should consider for the NPPA as a new NPPA category, please let us know. So projects that you see going through full 106 that you, or maybe there's been some B6s that you've had a couple of the same types of projects. Let us know if you think those would be good candidates for an NPPA category.
And don't say roundabouts, because we know that already. And I don't think it's happening, right?
Yeah, as of right now, it's a no. So no roundabouts, but anything else, let us know. And let us know about the right-of-way issues or, and or the category A's. We would really be interested in that.
I think for, you know, right away, for me, it would really, part of the question is whether there's any historic properties in the area, right? Because if it's in the middle of nowhere, or, you know, there's obviously nothing near there, you know, it's gonna be less important, right?
Sure, for B9s that have nothing but agricultural fields around, I don't care about your right-of-way needs. It's fine. But yeah, when it is adjacent to a historic resource, it becomes vastly more important. I would say it's more common with B1s than that we ask for more detailed right-of-way information. So yeah, maybe it depends on project type.
Yeah, Kelly, you make a good point there. Because when we do curb ramp projects, we do wait until we can get the exact amount of right away, if it's within a historic district or not, where that is. So we do wait to get that information. And then that's good to know about just if there's historic properties in the area. Thank you, Anthony. I appreciate that clarification. Just for general reference.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Kellen and Clint and Susan and everybody. It's a good topic, and yeah, let these folks know if y'all do have ideas. We're always open for suggestions, for new categories and or things we can do to improve the process. So if we're ready, I'm going to go over a few updates we have that we wanted to let you all know about first. An update that's going to be coming out on our listserv this week is we're going to start requiring that consultants submit to us Section 106 documents through ProjectWise. So consultants right now you can register, if you haven't already, you can register to have access to ProjectWise, which is our file sharing system, and it's a way we catalog our projects and documents across the agency. And so you can register to get a folder, and then you can actually upload a document into ProjectWise. And then when you're ready to let us review something, you can send us an email and just provide the link. You just have a link. And so it's no FTP sites, no, oh, this is too large, no breaking it up into smaller files. It's really simple. So on that end, it's a great tool. On the other end, when we have comments, file back in your folder and give you the link and say, hey, that folder's there, or that file is there with our comments. So it's really going to through the document review lifecycle, it's going to be a great tool. So we're going to provide a listserv with some instructions how to do that. A lot of consultants are already doing it. For SAM and different the groups in INDOT, you're already doing it, but we're going to require that for 106. And we know if folks aren't signed up, we know there might be a lag period there between getting registered and actually being able to use ProjectWise, and that's okay. But we want to start seeing those projects come through ProjectWise. But we'll provide you some of that information here in the near future. And I am going to post right now in the chat some of those links that you can use. Provide serve. See that? Okay. One other thing we want to talk about that we've updated that'll be coming through also, we just sent out the listserv this week, is we've updated our consulting party guidance for meetings. And that really is reflective of, what we talked about on one of our previous virtual chats. And it kind of really kind of codifies what we've been doing anyway with this, with our hybrid approaches to consulting party meetings with, some virtual, some in person, that hybrid approach. So we kind of wanted to make that a little more consistent and kind of spell out how that should work and some tips for that. And also we have some guidance that we've updated on our FX report that we've also talked on previous virtual chats. So we're just trying to really get these things to be more consistent and streamlined, and so people, can kind of have a resource to go to know how to do these things. So, I'm gonna segue into, really the best part of this session. No, I'm just kidding. But we started this last year about Halloween, and so when we want to hear scary stories, and it can be, for fun or real life, or it could be work, and that, so it could be serious things that you've encountered at work, or through the process. So we have some we were going to share, and then if anybody else has any, we would love to hear them. Anthony, did you want to go first? I know you have one.
Yeah, sure. I'll get it started. So this one comes from my non-work life, I guess, and I don't know. I not really a supernatural kind of person, but anyway, I was staying in this historic. It was a historic place that I was staying at. It was this apartment that was above a studio, and the things you had to know about it. And I can't really, or not to be weird about it, but I can't say exactly where it was. I have to keep things confidential a little bit. But it was a historic place. It was a kind of you can imagine it was on a campus that was a kind of a bucolic English kind of countryside feeling to it. And there was an old house there. The old house was vacant. No one was living there. It was empty. And then across the field was the studio with an apartment above it. And it was built by this guy in the early 20th century as a workspace to get away from his family and work there. But he also included the studio upstairs for not so good reasons, to host visitors, for his, let's just say he wasn't the most faithful in his relationships with. So anyway, fast forward to not so long ago, I was staying in this apartment just as a visitor, sleeping one night, and I swear, I heard someone coming up the stairs. And, it was like, I was awake enough to really think about, now, is that some other type of noise, and am I making that up? But I could really swear that it was someone walking up the stairs. So I went out into the stairwell, no one was there. Checked the door, it was locked. Okay, so I guess my mind played tricks on me, but a few weeks later, someone else was staying there that I know very well, who I trust. And they heard someone coming up the stairs and slowly sauntering across the living room. And then they saw the silhouette of an old woman in the doorway to the room that I had been staying in several weeks before. Now this person was so afraid that they did not get out of bed. and eventually the silhouette disappeared. But we always think that that might have been the ghost of the wife coming to look for her husband who was cheating on her. So that's my story.
Oh, spooky. So I was wondering if anybody, and you can raise your hand or in the chatter, has anybody heard of or had an experience with the old hag? Or have you had some sort of sleep paralysis or weird sensation that you wake up and you can't move? So I'd be interested to see if anybody's had those experiences. But once I was in grad school, and some of you might know I have a folk studies degree, and one of the books we were reading was the terror that comes in the night, and this is about this phenomenon that people have where they're visited in the night, where they wake up, they can't move, they can't speak, and they feel heavy, paralyzed. Some people describe it's like something is sitting on their chest. But what's really strange is that a lot of people describe that it's a woman, that's a shadowy woman. So that's really where the old hag name comes from. And it's really a cross-cultural phenomenon, although different cultures describe it different. So you can Google it, and a lot of people, and the scientific folks will say, well, it's just, it's sleep paralysis. It's where you're at in the REM cycle. It's just there's just a biological phenomenon. It's not anything supernatural. Well, what is strange is how they describe it. And so anyway, we had either just completed it or recently completed this book, and my wife, she wasn't my wife then, she came to stay with me, and she woke up in the night and hit me and said, "Oh my, the scariest thing ever has happened to me." I mean, somebody was in the house. This present, it was a woman, was in our house. I saw her at the foot of the bed, and I couldn't breathe, and I tried to scream, and she was really frightened. And so I hadn't told her about this. And so just from that first person perspective, she had no idea of this tradition or the stories or this phenomenon. And here she had this experience and described it as a woman in our foot of our bed. So it's crazy. So anyway, I don't know if anybody's had that experience, but I'm really fascinated by that. And to this day, Tara is still, she's still scared that that's going to happen again, even if she can rationally say, oh, it's just something to do with, the REM cycle or during, this was a truly frightening experience for her. And so it is for people. So anyway, and it is this cross-cultural phenomenon. And with, different cultures, describing it in different ways. Although an old hag is pretty popular in the Americas, at least North America. Does anybody else have anything they want to share?
I see we have another scary doll in the chat. That's terrifying.
Awesome. That is scary. That's scarier than Agnes.
It is, yeah, definitely.
Your story, Patrick, it's crazy to me that it just happened to be while you were reading about it, Tara had that. Has she had that before
No.
or since?
No. Only time ever. And I hadn't mentioned to her the book because it was an interesting to me, but it just wasn't something I shared with her really. And then, I had the book, in the book stand, like I was like, oh my God, this happened to you. This is so cool that this happened to you.
Well, if it doesn't make you believe in the actual existence of this figure, the old hag, it kind of makes you believe in some type of telepathic connection between you two.
Yeah. Well, and I don't have. I'm not saying it's supernatural. I'm not saying it. I can't. I'm not. Can't label it. I will just say that. For her to come and describe it as a woman, which just matches so many people's experiences, is just crazy. So. Yeah, I would have gave that doll away too, Nathan. Does anybody have any real life 106 NEPA field experiences or anything that they want to share that happened to you or might help others avoid in the future for as a community, something that there's a warning to others. Any dog bites, rabid dogs, Joe dogs. All right, well, oh wait. Really, Rachel? No, that's crazy. So not like in snow. Oh, crazy.
Wow.
That's creepy.
Yeah.
So this is Sean. I believe that bottom right photograph is from a field visit that Jeff and I were making, and noticed that creepy doll poking out of the window. And this is a NEPA in 106 lesson when conducting field work. We had pulled into the driveway of this house to park while we conducted the field work. And it must not have been a good spot along the roadway. But anyhow, the owner arrived as we were leaving and pulled in behind us and blocked our exit. And Jeff got out of the car to go speak to him, and he had a handgun on his lap or beside him or something, and was very angry. So just a word of caution: don't stay out of people's private drives and try to park on the right of way.
Yeah, and even I had an experience. Oh, it's been a decade ago, almost. Where we were doing, as 106 mitigation, we were going to replant. We were doing vegetative screening for the property, and the property owner. We were meeting. It was myself and some cultural resource office folks, and the consultant and the landscape architect. And you kind of think that's a feel good meeting, right? Because we're going to them to talk about what kind of trees they like, bush, what kind of landscaping they want, and where at. And so you kind of think it's a positive meeting. And well, they were still upset about the project, and so we go and we get there and they inform us that they're packing a gun, and they have a bigger gun in the truck, and it was threatening right away. They kind of threatened us, and so I don't recall the specifics of how we diffuse the situation, but we did get through it and we stayed and talked. But I think there are situations, and I think and maybe we probably would have been justified just to say, okay, we're out, we're done, sorry. But anyway, you have to kind of make that judgment call. But yeah, just be careful out there.
Yeah, and always send someone else to speak to the angry person. I hung out in the car and, you know, cowered under the dash.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kind of one it was a long time ago. This is Susan. I was working for the State Museum and Historic Sites, and I was at the Lanier Mansion, and I was trying to gather all their maintenance information and all the history of the building, blah, 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 put it together for them to find in one place, which was interesting. But they had me up on the 3rd floor in the sewing room, what they called the sewing room, which is where they did the costumes and stuff for the interpreters. And I was by myself, and the JFD Lanier built the Lanier Mansion, but his son Alexander lived there for a long time. And he was kind of a strange ranger. I don't know what all the stories were about him, but he was kind of an interesting figure. And I was up there by myself, and I know, you know, it's kind of a creepy house. There weren't very many other people there. They were all downstairs. And I was sitting there at that sewing table, and I had some files and stuff, you know, like maybe over here. And you know how you see something out of out of your peripheral vision? And there's nobody else up there. The windows weren't open. And I swear I saw somebody come, you know, this way out, not out of the wall, but just sort of move forward. And then, you know, I looked up and there wasn't anybody there. And I always thought maybe it was Alexander Lanier or one of the people that had died in the house or something. But, you know, that I swear I saw something move, and, you know, so that's kind of a related thing. It was creepy. It was creepy.
That's especially,
Yeah.
especially when it happens in an old historic mansion. Yeah.
I could see that from Mitch. Well, I think we're about at our limit, but if anybody else has anything to share in the last minute, that'd be awesome. And then, but otherwise, I think we are probably ready to wrap up. We really appreciate everybody's time and patience, and to Mary and Stephanie and Susan and Lynn and Kelly, especially time out to work on, you know, the presentation and slides and thinking through those issues that are important to all of us. So we appreciate it. And this video will eventually make its way up on our YouTube channel, and so you can go back and look at it if you need to or want to. And anybody else that, you know, wants to look at it, what attend today, they can go.
And as always,
Think of.
I was just gonna say, as always, you know, send us your comments, suggestions, questions for future virtual chats, and we'll probably be trying to come back and do one more before the end of the year. Yep. Probably after the Thanksgiving holiday. So yeah.
Yep. We're going to try to do another. So thank you all very much. Have a great Halloween.
Thank you all very much.
See ya. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.